All right. So everyone, thank you guys so much for attending today, for jumping on to today's webinar. As you can see, I am a financial planner. I pride myself in being good at a lot of things like taxes and estate planning, but creativity is far down the list of things. So when I try to come up with a New Year's resolutions kind of catchy title, this is as buzzworthy as I was able to come up with. Retirement resolutions, maximizing fun, minimizing taxes, and mastering cash flow. Today, we're going to talk about how to master cash flow in retirement, minimize hopefully your tax bills, and hopefully, Lord willing, we're going to have some fun along the way in retirement. Like many of you have heard if you've worked with Aspen, one of our beliefs as a firm is we believe one of the most important elements of our jobs is just to make our clients' lives easier. We firmly believe that a lot of you guys have worked so hard for so long, you've sacrificed so much that we feel strongly that we want our clients to live your best lives possible, living stress-free and enjoying your retirement. So today's webinar is really about the importance of tax-efficient income planning in retirement. To put it plainly, the skills it takes to build a retirement are very different than one that will get you through retirement. And maybe even the same logic goes to how you built a portfolio. We'll talk about like a portfolio getting to retirement and a portfolio that gets you kind of through retirement. Um, one mentor of mine along the way, he kind of told me this metaphor that I liked, and I didn't believe him, so I fact checked him, and it was actually true, um, about summiting Mount Everest. So, as many of you know, it's a very dangerous feat to climb Everest, but the fatality rate is actually more disproportionately skewed to those who descend Mount Everest. So, to put it plainly, more people actually who pass away summiting Everest pass away on the descent, not the ascent or getting to the summit. And retirement planning is not all that different. And so we meet with a lot of folks and they reach this milestone, whether it's accumulating a certain number for their net worth, or Candace and I were just talking this morning about like what's a number? Like how do you pinpoint like a specific dollar amount where you can retire? And when you're working hard, it's easy to kind of get to that number because you just spend less than you make and you save along the way, hopefully make wise, prudent decisions. But it's descending, it's withdrawing, it's retirement income planning. It's, hey, you created this pile of assets. Now you have to somehow generate a salary out of this thing because your salary is non-existent for most of you guys and most folks who don't have pensions and Social Security, or I mean, Social Security is something you can lean on, but it's a very different world today. And so, a brief overview of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with some questions that many of us consider as we think about retirement. And then we're going to walk through the following main areas. We're going to define what goes into a retirement income plan. We're going to break down 3 steps to consider as you think about generating income in retirement. We're going to discuss the conventional versus maybe a more optimal approach to retirement income planning, and also give some examples of each of those. We're also going to go over a brief example of how this same philosophy can bleed into optimal Social Security planning. I know Social Security has come about for a lot of the clients I'm working with, and so hopefully for this call today, or the ones who are going to watch this as a recording, you look into that. And lastly, we're going to talk about some actionable steps you can take from this webinar to ensure your retirement plan is in good shape. We want to make sure these webinars are not only instructive, but they're informative, and there's things that you can kind of go forth and execute on your own volition or alongside of our team here at Aspen after the fact. And as always, at the end, we're going to take time to go over some questions that you have. We've already had a handful come through via email, which we greatly appreciate. So we'll bookend this with questions that you all have today. So I wanted to start with a slide on something that, I mean, kind of spurred me at the onset of my career. I spent the first 5 or 6 years of my career at Fidelity Investments. And I worked with a subset of the population where, their average net worth was somewhere between 2 and 5 million, not too dissimilar from the folks who work with at Aspen. And in a world where you work at Fidelity, as you guys, if you worked with me before, you know it's such a volume game. I think when I left Fidelity, I had 300 something families I'd consistently talked to. But you do just talk to just a large swath in terms of quantity of people. And what it normally boiled down to was a handful of different questions. And those questions are not too dissimilar from many of the folks here at Aspen who are going to retire. And that's this: am I going to be okay? Is my spouse going to be okay? Are my kids or my loved ones, are they going to be okay? And then lastly, what kind of legacy am I going to leave behind? And so you talk to client after client after client, and whether they're asking about how their investments are doing, or how their portfolio is shaking out, or how their savings rate is, and how they're building wealth for retirement, when you really boil down these questions, what they're really asking is, am I going to be okay? Like when I put in my 2 weeks notice, like, do I have enough? Is it going to last? Is my spouse going to be okay if something happens to me? And what I found, what was interesting was after Fidelity, I went and worked for a family office for kind of ultra high net worth families in the Dallas area. And I sat across from, it was one of the first clients I worked with more money than I never know what to do with in my lifetime. And their questions were the exact same. Am I going to be okay? Are my kids going to be okay? What kind of legacy, what kind of generational legacy am I going to leave behind? And I thought that's odd. You got clients on two ends, complete polar opposite ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, but they're all asking the same things. And so I think these questions are universal insofar as before we retire, these are questions that are kind of permeating our minds and we're thinking about. And so when you think about retirement, what you're really asking is, yeah, what is life going to look like after this point? And do I have enough to make it last? And so I want these questions, if they haven't already, to kind of be ruminating in your thoughts as we move forward. But again, before we get started, I want to look at this graphic. I love this graphic from Carl Richards. Um, in a job as a financial planner is often to identify clients. They come to us at point X. They're saying, hey, we're at this point. Can we retire? Or maybe some acute event has happened, or they've gotten divorced or lost a loved one. They've gone through some event that's brought them to Aspen Wealth Management. And they're saying, hey, where do we go from here? We're at point X. We want to get to point Y. What is it going to have to take? And so what our job as financial planners is we kind of attack that from two different angles. You might have heard us talk about this in a meeting if you've worked with us before. But we're going to focus on that first question from a minute ago. Am I going to be okay? Is my spouse going to be okay? And what we do is we tackle this from two different lenses. And I promise I'm setting this up so we can get into cash flow planning here in a little bit. But um, we look at financial planning through two different lenses, if you will. The first of which is called goal-based planning. And goal-based planning simply it involves in like looking at the setting and achieving individual financial goals. So if I want to retire, what kind of lifestyle do I want to live? What does travel look like in retirement? Do I want to buy that second home or just downsize or upgrade my current home? Like these are all tangible goals that we set out. I want to pay for my kids' college. I want to leave behind X dollars for my estate. That's what we consider goal-based financial planning. And so goal-based financial planning often starts at point Y. Where do you want to go? Cash flow based planning involves the steps and the measures it takes in place to get there. So we start at point X and we say, okay, we know we want to get to point Y. What actionable steps do we have to take between X and Y to get there? And is there anything we can do along the way to mitigate our tax liabilities, to become more tax efficient as we plan for retirement? And so that's what one thing we're going to talk about today. As we traverse from where you are today to where you want to be down the road, how can you do so tax efficiently? And if you're living a life in retirement or you're thinking about retirement or you're right on the horizon, like what are some things that you can be considering as you move forward? So that brings us to the purpose of today's presentation. Like, what is a retirement income plan? At a high level, a retirement income planning, it exists to ensure you have enough income or assets to avoid pitfalls in retirement. So you can see here, it's a detailed plan to determine how to use your assets. You can you can read the slide. I don't need to read it for you. But a retirement income plan is designed to help really do three things: to help minimize any risks down the road, either seen or unforeseen. A lot of folks, when we talk about retirement planning, these risks could be like longevity risk. People often underestimate how long they may live in retirement. We talk about healthcare expenses, inflation, asset allocation, like how's your money invested, asset location, where is it invested? Maybe withdrawal rate. Do we have an overly liberal withdrawal rate, or are we too aggressive? We jokingly say like, are we running hot, or do we need to put a foot on the brakes a little bit? So that's minimizing the key risks. Identifying sources of income. Like we just touched on a minute ago, when you retire, there's no more money coming in. It's primarily, other than Social Security for most folks, it's going out. And but for what is coming in, what are those sources? Is it Social Security? Is it a pension? Do you potentially have a rental property or some form of passive income? And then the third part that's really important is just monitoring the thing. It's course correcting. Some of our folks who work with us on an ongoing basis, they know what delineates us from a lot of firms is we like to have a high cadence, a high touch point with our clients. We like to meet with our clients multiple times a year if possible. And the reason being is if you talk to a client and let's say we're at point X on the axis and you go a couple of years without touching base, they can get really off course. And so to course correct, it involves maybe making some major changes to their investments or their savings plan. But if you have a regular cadence where you're keeping up with your clients on a or you're just keeping up your own personal financial plan on a systematic basis, making minor adjustments is just a lot more manageable. And it's no different than how we operate a lot of other parts of our lives, such as dieting or health or, reading consistently, things like that. So, what steps go into creating retirement income? Okay, coming up with a plan, whether it's for yourself or a loved one over the holidays or here at Aspen, whether you're 10 years away, 5 years, 1 year, or at retirement, there's always a few key components to monitor as you prepare for this exciting season of life. So before I kind of get into the three steps, for those who are 5 years out on this webinar, we're often refining like the when, the where, the how much you're going to need in your retirement plan. We're going to revisit your asset allocation strategy, maybe suggest some portfolio withdrawal strategies, or at least start talking high level about those, and adjust your retirement planning savings if necessary. When you're, let's say, two years out, 2 or 3 years out, we can help you kind of fine tune your retirement budget, prepare for your income strategy, and adjust your assets accordingly to maybe decrease risk and fund a short-term reserve. The closer we get to retirement, the more certainty we want to have in the money being there when we need it. So we have a whole slide dedicated for that. And then when you're 1 year out, like as retirement approaches, we want to help you finalize your budget and strategy, maybe start consolidating accounts, setting up your cash flow systems, making sure things are linked properly, helping you file for Social Security 3 months before you expect to receive your first check. These are all things, maybe Medicare conversations. These are all things that come in right at the cusp of retirement. And then some people say, okay, well, that gets me prepared for retirement. What do I do in retirement? Well, that's just as important. And we're monitoring annually, at the very least, your budget, your cash flow, your burn rate. What are you doing as you approach 72 or 73 when those required distributions kick in? Talk about your estate plan, maybe living gifts you're going to give to your loved ones, and making sure those are up to date as well. And so these are the three main steps as you kind of mull over all these things: 5 years, 2 to 3 years, 1 year in retirement. First thing is always take stock of what you have. What do you have? What's coming in? Just get a high level idea of what you have going on. Second, we want you to look at your portfolio. We want to scrutinize your portfolio. My clients have heard me say this phrase a lot, but I like to play God and stress test it. And I want my clients to know, and we do at Aspen, what could possibly go wrong? Let's poke holes in every potential angle so that when you actually need to retire and you do retire, you kind of played, what is the worst thing that could happen? And so you play the scenarios out in your head. And then lastly, create a cash flow stream. Develop a tax efficient withdrawal plan so it is proactive, not reactive as you get into retirement. So now we're going to kind of break these steps down in detail. So taking stock, planning could make the difference between wondering if your money will last and having confidence that we will. We often use the phrase, we want our clients retiring towards something, not from something. And more importantly, retiring with confidence. So what does retirement look like for you? These are questions you can consider as you take stock and think about, your I guess the vantage point you have in relation to retirement. What does retirement look like? Are you going to spend more time traveling? Are you going to work? Are you going to do consulting? Are you going to downsize? Maybe take care of your parents? Are you going to help children get on their feet? Do you have Are you going to maybe pay for a wedding or help your kids make a down payment on the first house? Understanding what your retirement looks like is paramount because that kind of dictates the withdrawal plan and how much cash you're going to need. Once you've identified how much you think you'll need or what retirement looks like, you can then say, okay, what assets do I have? over the years, you probably accumulated a number of accounts, such as 401ks, maybe IRAs, brokerage accounts. Some may be tax advantage, some may be taxable. As we talked about in another webinar before, taxable accounts are like brokerage accounts, non-retirement accounts, maybe high yield savings accounts, or people who bought I bonds over the last year or two. Tax advantage accounts are like IRAs, 401ks, Roths, HSAs. And so taking an assessment of what assets you have. Third, looking at your outside income sources. How much do you expect to receive from those sources? And what are the tax implications of receiving money from those sources? Are those sources, such as pensions or rental income, are they going to throw off your Medicare premiums? What is that going to do to your Social Security? These are all things we look at. And what is the right time to take Social Security? That's a great question for number three, is like, when's the optimal time to take Social Security? And we're going to talk about that today a little bit. And if you're in good health, like maybe postponing until 70 makes sense. We'll look into that. The fourth question, how much do you expect to spend? It's so important. It may surprise you that many retirees actually spend more in their first years of retirement than they did before, especially those who want to travel and kind of put their foot on the gas with hobbies and things that they've been putting off in their later working years. We call this the go-go phase of retirement. We want our clients to genuinely want, we have a travel bug for a lot of our clients. We want our clients to travel as much as they can while they are before the hips and knees age, where things start to get a little bit sore down the road and the bags get a little heavier to pack. So that kind of covers the how much you expect to spend. So two ways you can do this on number four. Preparing a detailed budget is good. You can go through your mint history, if you use credit cards or debit cards. There's honestly a lot of softwares you can use to kind of track that. But to me, my favorite is just sitting down with a spreadsheet or a pad of paper and looking at, okay, what's going out, what's coming in, and that's a healthy budget. Another way to do it, similar approach, maybe a little bit different, is what if instead of trying to figure out a budget, if you know you're living within a budget, you just want to maintain your lifestyle, what would you take in terms of assets to support your current income? So do you have enough assets just to support your existing salary? Could you recreate that? And then lastly, how much will you need from your portfolio? So you figured out how much you have, you figure out how much you need. So estimating living expenses for a year is really important. Another rule of thumb is to take your annual income take your annual income you'll need from the portfolio, right? And multiply it by 25. This is also called the 4% rule. So if you need, for example, $40,000 a year, 40,000 times 25 is $1,000,000. Another way a lot of y'all are familiar with is the 4% rule. So for every $1,000,000 you have, you can safely take out or conservatively take out 40,000 a year and probably just be fine in perpetuity. Okay, so we've talked about taking stock. What do you have? The next part is adjusting your portfolio. And this is incredibly important. This is one thing we're going to talk about. We look at portfolio valuations, at least in relation to our clients, in kind of a three-pronged approach, or a three-measured approach from three different perspectives. There's the practical, which you see here. And that's really simple. When you scrutinize your investments from every stock or mutual fund or bond you own, are you investing in the lowest cost, tax efficient, globally diversified investments or portfolio you can be in? If you believe in compound interest, which means money, hopefully, if it's invested properly, grows over time, you have to believe the same is true for fees and expense ratios. And so the less you pay in expenses, especially in terms of your investments, the more you keep in your pockets. And so from a practical sense, are you investing in a low-cost, tax-efficient portfolio? Then there's the emotional side. Along with practical challenges, it's important to remember the role that emotions play in investing. Okay. Market volatility is very real. And we know that over the last maybe 12 to 24 months, you've seen markets go down, they've gone up, and everywhere in between. And this is what a lot of y'all refer to as risk tolerance. When we have you fill out questionnaires before you become a client, we just ask you kind of high level questions about, hey, when the market last did this, how did you respond? Or how did it feel when you saw your account go from $1,000,000 to $750,000? That'd be a massive swing. But let's say $1,000,000 to $900,000. That's a massive swing. And how did that feel in your stomach when that happened? That's risk tolerance. Okay, mathematical is what we kind of call risk capacity. And so, in addition to the practical, making sure you have low cost investments, and emotional, making sure you're allocated properly to where your money's not too volatile, it kind of just gives you, anxiety when you check your accounts. The mathematical side is what we call risk capacity. Like, how much risk do we need to take on in your investments to hopefully grow to maintain a high probability of success in retirement? And so when we're looking at constructing a portfolio, we're often thinking of like using stocks, otherwise known as equities, bonds, which is called fixed income, alternative assets, such as real estate, maybe private credit, and cash. Okay, so those are the four kind of key areas, stocks, bonds, alternative assets, and cash. And the composition of which, how much we have in the market or out of the market, is really kind of predicated on that emotional mathematical part. A lot of folks have a very low tolerance. They don't like to see volatility. But if they have a very strong financial plan, they have a very high capacity. They could afford to take a lot of risk. Warren Buffett could be as risky as he wants. The man has more money than, generations known to do with it. But he may not want to take that kind of risk. And so he has a slug of cash in his account or a portfolio. And investors are no different. Some clients, what we want to do is we want to find the portfolio that supports their financial plan with the highest probability of success, but also that's in alignment with how they feel about money. You never want to be overextended in an aggressive portfolio if, when the markets do get volatile, you kind of pull the cord and hit the eject button. And that just leads to terrible, terrible returns for your accounts over time. And so that's kind of adjusting your portfolio, making sure you have a portfolio that is in alignment with your financial plan and your income needs. This is another way of looking at it for our clients who get closer to retirement. So before retirement, we've kind of got this on the left, this before retirement portfolio. Think of this as a traditional kind of 60-40 portfolio. 60% of your money in stocks or equities, 40% of your money in between bonds and cash. Okay. But what we really want our folks to do, especially for cash flow planning, is figure out, okay, how much do they need in retirement? And if we follow that same logic, that 4% rule, right? We want to have at least 12 to 15% of their money set aside in very conservative investments. So this is like short-term bonds and cash or money markets and things like that. And so the reason we do that is because we like our clients to have at least about a year's worth of spending in their checking and savings account. Okay, call that cash. So let's just hypothetically say a client needs $100,000 over the course of a year. We'll have $100,000 in their account, and then we'll have 300,000 or so in short-term bonds and cash, so that if the markets do become volatile, if they go up and down and they fluctuate, they're okay. They've got essentially 3 years worth of expenses set aside in very conservative holdings, so they're completely, not completely, but relatively unaffected by any market movements. And so the money is there when they need it. They can check their accounts, and if it's up or down, that's their own personal, that is going to be what the equities do. In order to have growth, you need to have some volatility along the way. But they can also rest peacefully knowing, hey, regardless of what the market's doing, I've got 3 years worth of income set aside, four if I include the cash I have in the bank. And so that tends to alleviate a lot of our client stresses as they get close to retirement. They have money set aside and they're willing to forego returns, right, for a portfolio designed and positioned properly so they can retire with confidence. Okay. And the reason this is so important because some of y'all have heard about the term sequence of return risk. Okay. And what I mean by that is in an account like on the left where you have before retirement, or if you have too much money in stocks, let's take the same screen and imagine everything in blue except cash was in the stock market, like a 95% stock market portfolio. But you need to maintain your lifestyle, you need, a big slug of that per year. Well, what would end up happening is if the stock market were down, you still need to generate cash off that account. Where are you going to pull it from? In order to generate cash out of this pile of assets, you got to sell your investments, right? Well, what if your investments are down 10 or 15% because the markets have been beaten up this year? Well, it means you're buying low, or I'm sorry, you're selling low to generate cash. And we never want our clients to have to be forced sellers of stocks amidst a volatile market to fund their lifestyle. When the stocks are up and they're running, that's great. But when they're down, we really like our clients to be able to hold and ride those things out. So that way they're not having to be forced sellers of depreciated assets to fund their retirement income planning needs. Which leads us to sequence of return risk. Sometimes some of y'all have heard this term. If not, it's kind of a technical term. But what you see here is sequence of return risk. And sequence of return risk, in its simplest form, is the danger that the timing of your withdrawals will harm your overall rate of return. Okay. And while annual returns matter, the sequence of those returns matter way more for those who are in retirement. When you're saving money and you're not pulling off your portfolio, you can deal with volatility. You actually like it because down markets means you're buying things hopefully at a discount. But when you're actually pulling on your account, you want to be very cognizant of what sources of money you're pulling it from. So in this scenario, what you see here, these two portfolios side by side, these two clients have the exact same annualized rate of return. Okay. In this sequence, what you see here, annual returns are identical in each portfolio, but their order is reversed. So on the left, under a down market or an early value, in year one, we have a negative 15%. Right out of the gate in retirement, this client went from $1 million to $800,000. Okay, this is a bad market year. And every year they're pulling out $50,000. You can see here at the top. So this is a retiree with $1 million taking 50 grand out, but client on year one lost 15%. So he's down to 800 grand. Client two, if you look at the very bottom of the screen, he's going to end the 25 years down 15%. But look at the difference. On the down market early values on the left, client one starts the first 3 years with negative returns. Client two starts with positive returns. Now, over those 25 years, they have the same annualized rate of return, but when they're pulling money is what makes a difference. So you can see here that, all things being equal, same annualized rate over that 25-year period. It's when they pulled on their money that made a significant difference. And in client one, he ends up, at year 22 running out of money, whereas client B or client two, in year 25, he still has, 2.5 million in the bank. And so it can make a massive difference. And that's why we're very big on, having the right allocation. So that way your market, regardless of how the markets are doing, you got money set aside that will be unaffected by sequence of returns risk. Okay, so we've talked about taking stock of what you have. We've talked about adjusting your portfolio in retirement. Next thing we're going to talk about is creating cash flow. When choosing an income approach, when choosing how you generate income in retirement, your best approach is going to depend on how much you saved, how much money you'll need, and how long you're going to need it. But it's really important to create a cash flow system that works for you. And so what I'm presenting to you right now are two different approaches that we hear of all the time. The one on the left is the old adage, I'm going to live off my interest and never touch my principal. I know everyone here on this call has probably heard that before. We're never going to touch our principal. We're going to live off the interest, okay? And on the right, what we recommend is more of a total return approach, okay? And so the interest column, the interest and dividends only, is live off interest and dividend payments and touch the principal only when absolutely necessary. Depending on the interest rate environment, though, this may be appropriate early, but it's really difficult, to be frank. You need a much larger portfolio to make this work, and income can be volatile as interest rates change. And in the world we're in today, interest rates are great, but it doesn't take a whole lot of distant memory to realize, like, we've been living in a really ugly interest rate environment from a low interest rate environment standpoint for several years. And so it's really difficult to do this successfully over time where you live off the interest and you spend the principal, or you don't touch the principal or you leave it intact. The total return sequence on the right you see is most retirees find they need to supplement their income from dividends and interest with sustainable rate of withdrawals from their principal. Okay, so to help clients feel more confident they won't run out of money over a 30-year period, we generally recommend they stick to that kind of 4% rule, maybe 4 to 5%. And that's from a thing called the Trinity study, wherein they took a kind of a 50-50 portfolio and said, if I just took 4% out a year per year, what would that do to my account over time? And over every economic period of time thus far in U.S. history, that money has worked. That's been there for 30 years. So the Trinity study is kind of that 4% rule that many of you guys have heard. But as you can see here, there's much more advantages. And it's much more flexible and, to be candid, much more tax advantageous than the other. So we've determined how we want to withdraw. We're going to use interest and dividends, and we're going to use capital gains or principal. And this is what I was kind of talking about earlier. If you keep a year's worth of living expenses set aside in the bank account, you need to plan your withdrawals. Okay, so we're going to take that client, for example, they're going to spend $10,000 a month, but they want to keep $100,000 in their account. What that looks like in practical terms here at Aspen is their account every month goes from 100 to 90, and then we push out 10,000 to them through a combination of pre-tax accounts like IRAs, maybe their brokerage account through selling gains and losses and what we call tax loss harvesting, or just realizing capital gains because 15% is a lot cheaper than for some of our clients, 24 or 32%. But it's maintaining a bank account, keeping a year's worth in, and as money comes out, you replenish. And it's this kind of revolving door. But how you get money from those buckets up top, the non-portfolio income sources, interest and dividends and withdrawals, that's where you have to be very cognizant of your taxes. Okay. And so it's really important on this cash flow slide to understand not only what going out, but what's going in. And as you withdraw, right, we're going to talk about different withdrawal sequences here later. Are there different ways you can pull on these two blue squares you see in front of you? Are there two different ways you can actually execute withdrawals more tax efficiently than others? And is there ways you can optimize when the right time is to take Social Security so over your lifetime you generate more assets? So that leads us to the what I'm talking about here. When we're thinking of the optimal way to withdraw from the main portfolio and kind of put it in the bank account, we fall into one of two camps. Okay, and this is what we call the conventional versus the optimal approach. Okay, retirement income in the United States are both complex topics on their own, but if you combine them, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Okay, something seemingly as simple as which accounts a retiree draws from first and what amounts can have a meaningful impact on their financial plan and their tax bill throughout retirement. Okay. So the conventional wisdom of withdrawing funds from taxable brokerage accounts first, then tax deferred accounts second, followed by tax exempt accounts third. Okay, that's if you ask someone on the street or you follow a lot of just pop culture, financial planning, you're going to hear that. Pull from the brokerage account first and tax deferred because those tax deferred accounts, they're taxable. You don't want to pay taxes on those. But as we all know, if you skirt something away long enough, by the time you actually have to course correct, like we talked about course correcting earlier, it can be an ugly thing to fix. I have three boys, and we've been trusting our sons to do chores better around their house, and our older son, one of his chores is making sure his room stays clean and cleaning it up before he goes to bed and things like that. Well, his room over the last few weeks has been spotless, and we're like, man, Atticus is really on it. And then I went to get some shoes out of his closet the other day, and it was knee deep in toys and just stuff. And so what he developed is a very simple habit of taking all the junk in his room, throwing it into his closet, shutting the door, and hoping it doesn't burst open. And I think a similar approach kind of is like the conventional wisdom. It's like, hey, let's just kick this can down the road and we'll deal with it later. But what ends up happening is when you have to deal with it, it's really difficult. And it would be so much better to have to regularly be kind of cleaning house, if you will, and making sure your plan is optimal. That's my segue to the optimal approach. So the more personalized or optimal strategy takes withdrawals in a manner that directly manages a retiree's tax bracket. This strategy withdraws from tax deferred accounts up to the amount where any additional distribution would push the retiree into a higher bracket. If any additional withdrawals are needed, they're taken from taxable accounts and then from Roth accounts. This strategy is an example of a more personalized approach and something that can be implemented with help from a financial planner or tax professional before selling investments or making decisions about withdrawals per an account type. So what this looks like in practical terms for a lot of our clients here at Aspen is we give them every month money out of their pre-tax IRA because we know, hey, if I give a client $5,000 a month from their IRA over the course of 12 months, they're going to have 60 grand in their bank account from Aspen, right? That's 60,000 of taxable income. But then we factor in their deductions and all these other things, and we go, okay, beyond that, well, maybe what are the numbers going to vary client to client? If we have needs above and beyond that, we'll pull from their brokerage account or their investment account. Okay. And then let's say Q4 every year, they want to take their family on a big trip or something like that. Or there's too many capital gains in their account. And realizing you're selling any of those things would be tax inefficient. Well, we always have this Roth bucket we could pull on, and there's no tax implications from pulling from a Roth or an HSA account. If used for medical expenses, we can talk about that. And so it's more personalized, it's more nuanced. And it's what drives me nuts when you hear people say, like, follow this cookie cutter advice, because to be candid, folks, personal finance is just that, it's personal. And so every single one of our clients have a different withdrawal plan that's tailored to them and their needs. And we're always going to opt for the optimal approach, not because it's more complicated, but because it saves them money. And so, what we want to focus on is where each income falls into the tax bracket to hopefully lower taxes over their lifetime. So what does this look like in practical terms? This is the conventional approach, okay? So what we've done here is we've actually created a kind of an example or scenario with a couple. And this is not homogenous to too many couples we see here at Aspen. So this is a 65-year-old married couple. We're going to call them John and Jane Doe. And they have $1 million in retirement savings, and they're planning for a 30-year retirement, okay? They've got $250,000 in a brokerage account. So again, 250 in that taxable account in green. They've got 500,000 in their traditional IRAs, and they got $250,000 in Roth IRAs. So 250 in Roth, 250 in brokerage, 500 in traditional. This couple is going to receive 30,000 per year in Social Security. Okay. And benefits before taxes, and they're going to need to start taking RMDs at age 72. This couple is going to anticipate a total need of $75,000 from their retirement portfolio each year to maintain their lifestyle in retirement. Okay, we've simulated the future and after-tax performance of these three strategies. So you can kind of see here, this conventional strategy is where you take a sequential withdrawal strategy where you tap the brokerage accounts or that taxable account first till it's fully depleted. Then you move to that tax deferred accounts. These are your traditional IRAs. Okay. And then finally, your Roth accounts. Now, this strategy seeks to make use of the full benefit of tax-deferred growth and tax-deferred accounts, such as IRAs, 401ks, you see that. But what you notice there in that blue, that really dark blue here are the RMDs, okay? Look at what they're taking in excess of their RMDs, right? They're taking a ton. You can kind of see here in the middle of the screen. All this blue, they go green, brokerage, IRAs, Roth, and they save all the Roth for the back end. And so that's the conventional approach. What I'm going to show you, which I inadvertently clicked on a second ago, is a more optimal approach, okay? And this is going to flip a little bit around, but you notice the big delineation between the ages of 65 and 72, okay? Look at there. And in this scenario, same couple, 65-year-old married couple with 1 million in retirement savings, 30-year retirement. Our analysis shows both the personalized withdrawal strategy or the optimal strategy has significant benefits to them over their lifetime. Okay. In this example, the proportional and more personalized withdrawal strategy reduces the married couple's average estimated bill by $28,174 or 33,000 some change over 30 years. So essentially, it's going to save them $1,000 a year on taxes compared to the conventional approach. It's going to also result in an account balance at age 95 that's on average about 100 grand higher than the former plan. Okay. Now I know this is a hypothetical, these aren't guaranteed future results, but by and large, it is a much more tax efficient and, to be frank, lucrative financial plan in the end. And here are kind of the high level results of this. The proportional strategy is a different strategy. We're not really going to touch on that one today, but we're happy to talk about it if you have any questions after the fact. That's kind of a much more simplistic form where you take proportional savings from different accounts, but really the conventional versus personalized strategy is what we're looking at. And as you can see here, your annualized tax number from the conventional versus the personalized is about $1,100. Okay. And not only that, you'd have over $100,000 left in your account balance after 30 years given this plan. Okay. And there's a lot of assumptions baked in here, but I want to kind of show you the difference between taking a traditional approach, a more personalized, nuanced approach, factoring in taxes, and how that plays out over a long-term time horizon. Now, we'll kind of button this up with saying no single withdrawal strategy is optimal for every retiree. Okay. With any retirement withdrawal strategy, there's a trade-off between tax deferred growth and future tax liabilities. Decisions about from which account and how much to withdraw can have a meaningful impact and longevity on your assets and your retirement plan success. For retirees with large IRAs or 401k balances, as well as savings and brokerage accounts, a proportional strategy can make sense. It's a very simple approach. But for others with more complex needs, as we often find with Aspen, working with a financial planner and tax professional can help. Either way, retirees or soon to be retirees can work with a planner and should work with a planner in collaboration with a tax professional to create, manage, and achieve a tax efficient retirement income withdrawal strategy. And I've already hit on this cheesy little buzzword I say, but the short answer of that is personal finance is just that. It is personal. So every client's plan is different, whether you have Social Security, whether you've been remarried or you've been widowed and you have different Social Security options available to you, whether you have all your money in cash in a 401k account. Maybe we do things like Roth conversions to give you some tax diversification in retirement. The one thing I love more than anything about my job is every client is so uniquely different and their goals are different. They want to travel. One wants to go to Paris, Texas. One wants to go to Paris, France. But kidding aside, it's you are not a cookie cutter person and you don't deserve a cookie cutter plan. You deserve something custom and tailored to you and your loved ones. So I teased it a little bit a while ago, but we're going to take the same logic of kind of optimal withdrawal planning and apply it just briefly to Social Security. We have an entire other webinar for Social Security, so please go to our Aspen Wealth Management YouTube page if you want to visit that. But I want to show you a very practical example that follows the same train of thought, okay? So in this scenario, we got Jim and Betty. Jim and Betty are going to be retiring in 2 years when Jim turns 66 and Betty's 62. Now, originally, kind of conventional logic, originally both of them planned to start taking Social Security right away. Okay. However, after talking with their financial planner, they found they could boost their benefits substantially if Jim, the higher earner, actually waits until he's eligible for maximum benefits. And so, what you can see here on the screen, the annual benefits shown in the first table are lower than those used in the plans. Benefits in the first chart are in today's dollars, they don't adjust for inflation. But what you can see here, if they take it early at 62, Jim's going to get 22,500, Betty's going to get 19,000 some change. If they wait until full benefit, 66, they'll get 30,025 and some change. And lastly, call it 40,000 and 34,000 at 70. So the original plan, if they both started taking it at 66, and I'm sorry, 66 for Jim and 62, they'd get 50,000 a year, $51,612 over their lifetime, assuming they live to 90, they'd get $2 million out of the system. But what if they did a more optimized plan? What if they got a little bit creative and they said, how much can I squeeze over the system out of my lifetime? I'm not focused on maximizing my years. I'm going to throw my cards on the table. I'm going to live until 90. And on my 90th birthday, it's going to be a birthday and a sad day because that's when I'm hiking over. But in this optimized plan, what you see here is Jim actually waits to take his until 70. But between 66 and 70, he takes spousal. Okay. So what he does is he takes the spousal benefit for years 1 through 4. He gets about 13,000 some change out of that period of time. And then she gets her full, she gets that amount, $20,088. But if you combine those, over that time period, that's 33,000 some change. However, years 5 and after, he's going to get the maximum benefit. Again, there's an 8% adjustment a year. We've seen that. So $45,924. She's going to get her same early benefit, $20,088. And if you combine those years, we're at 68,000 some change. You push that over their lifespan, and you're looking at about $300,000 difference over their lifespan by just being a little more creative with how they've gone about thinking over their Social Security. This is very, very common, a very sound strategy for our clients who have dual income households. So for one spouse two spouses who have met the criteria for reaching full retirement age and Social Security, or they have at least some options to consider. You can see on the bottom left different assumptions like 2.5% inflation adjustments and things like that. But what you see here is a very simple strategy. It's not rocket science, but if applied, it could save this couple of about $300,000 over their lifetime, which again means $300,000 they're not taking out of their portfolio, which could mean 300,000 or more they give to their heirs or their loved ones down the road. Okay, I thought that was a very important slide to go over. That kind of takes the same logic of conventional versus optimal approaches and applies it to Social Security. So we covered a lot. As we say with financial plans, sometimes it feels like you're drinking out of a fire hose. Where do you go from here? Okay, so if you're listening today or watching on YouTube or you're watching this as a recording, the most important thing is to evaluate where you are today. Review your savings, your income, your expenses, both current and anticipated. Look at your portfolio, scrutinize your portfolio. You're doing yourself no favors by not kind of poking holes in your financial plan because you'd rather find them now than later on the other side of on the decision to retire. Identify where you want to be tomorrow. Consider when and where you want to retire, what your lifestyle may be. And some people have a hard time with that. And so what we do at Aspen, to be candid, is we say, hey, don't tell me the dollar amount for travel. Just tell me where you want to travel. What does a trip look like? And then we'll go and research and talk with independent people and say, hey, my client's kind of describing this. What would that cost? And maybe that's a better way of doing it. And so we're happy to do that for you as a service if you're interested, and then determine where you want to go from here. If you know where you are and you know where you want to be, that third scenario, that third prompt is really important. You're likely to find a delta. You need to make changes to your portfolio, your withdrawal strategy, your assets, and so your Social Security planning. Figuring out that delta is so important because that's when you can actually affect change. And then the most important there is monitor regularly. Don't get too off course where it takes a huge swing to course correct, or maybe a tax implication of course correcting. Monitor it regularly, at least semi-annually, if not more. And then to put it plainly, have a plan. Nothing frustrates me more than putting financial plans together for clients. And I like to circle up maybe 60 or 90 days later and say, hey, we laid out all these recommendations, how are things going? And it doesn't come to fruition. And so we really want to stress the importance of having a plan is great. Having an executed plan is what's important. Okay. And so that kind of covers our webinar today. But we really appreciate everyone here for taking the time out of their day to be on this call, or for taking their time to watch this online through a recording, or through a newsletter that we send out regularly. I know we've had a handful of questions kind of come through via email, but I wanted to see if Candace had any fielded questions for us as we came along the way.
I don't see any here. I just see I've gotten some emails, not in the chat, but in emails saying how much they appreciate you explaining Social Security in the 3-prong approach. So kudos, Jim.
Thank you. One question I have from a client, which is pretty common, is sometimes people hear about like buckets, like do we have, short-term bucket, medium bucket? That's a kind of high-level philosophy. It's a way some people manage portfolios. We talked about that actually in another webinar before. It's one of those things that are great in theory, pretty hard to execute. And so what we try to do is within our clients' accounts, kind of let them know, hey, rather than having a full-on bucket of an account specifically earmarked for bonds, we have 2 to 3 years worth of living expenses tied up in short-term securities. And so we like to really stress for our clients, hey, by all means, we're going to do everything in our power to make your accounts grow over time. We're going to invest in the markets and hope to maintain a healthy rate of return above inflation. But we're willing to give up some risk and some volatility, some ups and downs in the market, so that you have peace of mind knowing you got 3 years worth of bills set aside in an account that's comfortable for you. And that's where we really stress like risk tolerance and risk capacity, how you feel about money, and then what you can afford to take on in terms of risk in your accounts down the road. So that kind of is a sidestep way of answering the bucket approach, but it's one we get quite a bit. And so that's all the questions we have today. We sincerely appreciate all of you for jumping on today. And I know I can respond to some of those questions, maybe more personalized and via email, because some of the questions are more tailored to our individual clients. So I'll respond to those via email. But if you do have any questions, please feel free. Our emails are right here on the screen. Jim at Aspen Wealth Management, my colleague Candace at Aspen Wealth Management. And we are happy to assist you with anything that you guys need, and sincerely appreciate y'all for taking the time. We got 9 minutes left, so if you've got a meeting at 2 o'clock, take a little break between now and then, and hopefully we talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.